You are watching the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Travel in some places is impossible. Nothing can get in, nothing can get out.
The race to rescue hundreds still unaccounted for as roads remain ravaged by Helene, who was sent in to help with response efforts, and the state investigation opened as the death toll rises. The East Coast port strike only on day 2, but even a brief work stoppage could have huge impacts. The imports you could see having shortages first across the country. Then how a new kind of technology is helping doctors detect breast cancer way sooner than traditional mammograms. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David, and tonight, death toll rising in the aftermath of Helene, now the second deadliest hurricane to hit the United States in the last 50 years after Katrina. And the number of people killed, that keeps rising, having surpassed 180 this afternoon, with hundreds more still missing and feared dead. This as the Biden administration deploys 1,000 troops to assist with response and recovery efforts in hard-hit North Carolina. In Tennessee, the state says it's now investigating 11 workers who were killed after they were swept away by floodwaters after remaining on the job at a plastics factory in Irwin. The state looking into allegations against that company that workers weren't allowed to leave until it was far too late to make it out safely. Right now, hundreds of roads across the Southeast remain closed, making it hard to get aid to tens of thousands who are still without running water. In Asheville, North Carolina, aid groups are on the ground serving as many families as possible as local volunteers themselves try to work through the trauma.
This is the most devastating thing I've ever seen in our whole city. I think that the loss of life, the fact that if you don't have cash, you can't get anything. We've gone to stores, water's out, ice is out. People slept overnight at gas stations.
This as frustration grows in hard-hit areas over the lack of cell service days after states were hit. Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile say service has only been restored to about 60% of impacted areas. FEMA officials working to help bridge the communication gap.
We brought in satellite capability, put that in each of the counties that have been impacted. We're moving satellite radios or satellite phones into those counties as well to help with the local officials. And then we're working with those providers to bring in portable cell on wheels.
This afternoon, President Biden surveyed the damage both from the air and on the ground in Greenville, South Carolina. This as Vice President and Democratic candidate Kamala Harris toured impacted areas in Augusta, Georgia. The East Coast dock workers strike, that is now in its second day. 36 ports from Maine to Texas closed as 45,000 workers belonging to the International Longshoremen Association remain on the picket lines seeking higher wages and assurances against the implementation of automation at the ports. Before heading out to the Carolinas earlier today, President Biden warned against preventable outcomes of a prolonged strike.
This natural disaster is incredibly consequential. The last thing we need on top of that is a man-made disaster, what's going on at the ports. We're getting pushback already, and we're hearing from the folks regionally that they're having trouble getting product they need because of the port strike.
President Biden went on to say that he believes the consortium of port owners have been making billions of dollars in profits and now need to bargain with the union to get a deal done. In the meantime, even a short strike could create shortages of certain perishables like tropical fruits, bananas, mangoes, dates, figs, and pineapples, just to name a few. Certain alcoholic beverages, including beers and wines, will also be impacted. And some experts believe that for every day of a work stoppage, it creates a week of backlog. Store patrons and owners alike are already worrying about what is to come.
It still costs you $5 to get a gallon of milk. What's it going to be when they strike? The workers do have a point that they need to be paid for their worth and their value, but they've got everybody in the palm of their hand.
Basically, it's just stuck. No one knows where it is. They don't know if it's on the water. They don't know if it's in the port sitting in a container. And so we're just trying to scramble and figure out alternatives.
investigations. There was a flight that left a couple of hours ago from Beirut, had a capacity of 300, had somewhere a little over 100 American citizens and their family members who departed on it.
Tonight, Americans being chartered out of Lebanon, where Israeli troops are on the ground as we sit on the precipice of a much larger war that will further involve the United States. This as we wait for what's expected to be a significant retaliatory response from Israel against Iran, a day after Iran fired nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israel, telling the UN today it was a necessary response.
Iran's missile strike were a necessity and proportionate response to Israeli continued terrorist aggressive acts over the past 2 months.
Tonight, President Biden and other G7 leaders say they will sanction Iran for that attack. Our Kayla Gaskin's joining us now with more on the rising tensions in the Middle East.
Israel promising significant retaliation after Iran launched nearly 200 missiles into Israel on Tuesday. John Spencer, chair of urban warfare studies at West Point, says Israel has to respond.
There has to be severe consequences, or you basically establish a new standard where the Islamic regime in Iran thinks it can attack Israel at will whenever it wants.
Meanwhile, more IDF ground troops headed to Lebanon to fight Iranian proxy and U.S. designated terror group Hezbollah. We were at the Israel-Lebanon border 2 weeks ago as part of a delegation organized by the nonprofit American Middle East Press Association. Hezbollah started launching rockets into northern Israel the day after the October 7th attack in solidarity with Hamas. Since then, there's been near daily exchanges of rocket fire. This fighting forcing tens of thousands to evacuate their homes along both sides of the border.
I want to go back home. Everyone wants to go back home.
The Lebanon invasion spurred by mounting political pressure within Israel to secure this border so civilians can return home. We spoke with a resident of Kibbutz Metsuva that sits near the Lebanese border.
What do you want the Israeli government to do in order for you and the other residents here to return?
Bring all the hostages back, first of all, and to deal with Hezbollah. To make us safe, we need a solution. Hopefully not with the war, but if it's necessary, the price is going to be high.
And again, the United States standing firmly behind Israel, warning Iran at the United Nations today not to attack Israel or the U.S.
And Kayla, we're also learning the U.S. played a role in shooting down those Iranian missiles aimed at Israel. What are government leaders saying?
Well, Amira, military officials confirming the U.S. fired about a dozen interceptors to help take down those Iranian missiles. And these came from 2 U.S. Navy destroyers. President Biden also saying the United States is actively supporting Israel's defense and fully supportive of Israel's assault today. When asked about how the U.S. would respond to Iran, the president said it's an active discussion and remains to be seen. Amira.
All right, Kayla Gaskin's reporting live from Washington, D.C. Thank you. In Gaza, Israeli strikes continue to pummel the enclave. Video here showing the aftermath of strikes that killed 90 and injured dozens more, including children, according to the health ministry in Hamas-run Gaza. Video seen by CNN from one hospital shows at least one little girl badly injured and covered in dust. IDF forces say they're targeting Hamas command centers and the strikes were precise. Gaza officials say the strikes hit an area where displaced people were taking shelter, something that is against international law. 3 Swedish citizens aged 15 to 20 arrested for throwing hand grenades at the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen this morning. The devices did explode near the building, but police say no one was injured. Yesterday, shots were fired outside of the Israeli embassy in Stockholm, Sweden, and there is no known connection between the two events. A newly unsealed filing from special counsel Jack Smith accuses former President Donald Trump of, quote, resorting to crimes after the 2020 election. The brief was filed last week to give Judge Tanya Chutkan more information following the Supreme Court's July ruling providing Trump some immunity from prosecution. Some of the new evidence is from Trump's social media posts and conversations with former Vice President Mike Pence. And more charges could be coming against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Federal prosecutors say they are pursuing several related investigations. Adams pleading not guilty to the current federal corruption charges against him. And prosecutors say he accepted foreign bribes and other gifts. If convicted, he does face up to 45 years in prison. Georgia's Attorney General Chris Carr is appealing the Superior Court decision that struck down Georgia's abortion law that would have restricted almost all abortions after 6 weeks. That ruling, for now, keeps abortions in the Peach State available until fetal viability, which could be between 22 and 24 weeks of pregnancy. This appeal now heads to the state Supreme Court. There's no word on if or when they will hear the appeal. Bank of America customers nationwide are having difficulties accessing their accounts online and through the mobile app. Down Detector says they've received nearly 20,000 reports of outages beginning shortly after noon today. Many customers say their accounts showed balances were zeroed out or said account temporarily unavailable. The bank called it a glitch, and they are working to solve the problem. Dr. Mark Chavez pleaded guilty today to conspiring to distribute ketamine, a surgical anesthetic, to actor Matthew Perry. The doctor admitted he got the drug from a former clinic and wholesaler distributor where he gave a fraudulent prescription. Chavez faces up to 10 years in prison. The Friends actor died last October, and a medical examiner ruled ketamine was the primary cause of death. The trial date for Ryan Routh, the man accused of attempting to assassinate Donald Trump, has been set for November 18th. Routh pleaded not guilty in court on Monday, facing 5 new charges against him, including attempted assassination. The Secret Service says they spotted him with a rifle hiding on Donald Trump's golf course right outside of Mar-a-Lago earlier this month. Routh is said to have hid in the bushes for up to 12 hours before he was chased away and then eventually arrested. Snapchat is again coming under fire over child safety concerns. As part of a lawsuit filed last month, New Mexico's Attorney General says newly released internal documents show the platform ignored reports of sextortion, didn't notify users, didn't use verifiable age verification, and allowed minors to connect with adults. Snapchat argues it has safety guardrails to protect minors. Coming up, campaigning is ramping up following last night's VP debate, where the map stands with just weeks to the election. Then why economists were surprised by a new jobs report and what it means for the economy. And later, a group of women got trapped at a bachelorette party in North Carolina for days. Inside that harrowing story on the other side. We are a little over a month away from the November election, and the vice presidential candidates are hitting the campaign trail following last night's debate. Senator J.D. Vance holding an event right now at the Berlin Raceway and Entertainment Complex in Marne, Michigan.
We, of course, had a debate last night, a vice presidential debate. I thought it went pretty well. I got to be honest, I feel a little bad for Governor Walz. And the reason I feel bad for him is because he has to defend the indefensible, and that is the record of Kamala Harris.
And Governor Tim Walz was on a bus tour of central Pennsylvania with Senator John Fetterman, meeting with Latino leaders in Reading.
So I know it was a beautiful Tuesday night. Anybody watch the debate last night? Look, not bad for a football coach, not bad. So you also saw something interesting. We had a civil but spirited debate.
Both VP candidates improved in their favorability ratings after last night, and most viewers thought the tone of the debate was positive, according to a CBS News and YouGov survey. Well, it is too soon to know exactly how the debate will impact the race, but the National News Desk's Matt Gelka shows us where things stand right now as the campaigns hone in on 7 swing states that could tip the scales.
There were multiple times in the vice presidential debate where both candidates tried to speak directly to the undecided voters tuning in.
Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare.
And it's those undecided voters in a handful of key states that could sway the entire election. New swing state polling released Wednesday from the nonpartisan Cook Political Report shows just how tight the margins are. Vice President Kamala Harris was leading, but barely, head-to-head against Donald Trump in 5 swing states. Trump was ahead by 2 points in Georgia, and the 2 candidates were tied in North Carolina. Any lead Harris or Trump had was within the margin of error of the poll, meaning it's still a toss-up in the states that might decide the whole thing. Both campaigns game planning for every election scenario, so we wanted to show you a couple. This is the electoral map with the blacked out states, those swing states we've been talking about, but the entire election could come down to Pennsylvania. For example, if the vice president were to sweep the Rust Belt and then capture the Keystone State, she gets to 270, she wins the election. But on the other hand, if the former president were to capture Pennsylvania and also sweep these southern states down here, that's 270. The rest of the map doesn't matter. The map math explains the focus of both campaigns this week. Walz hit Pennsylvania for his first post-debate stop, while Vance went to Michigan. Harris surveyed storm damage in Georgia before planned visits to the Rust Belt. Meanwhile, Trump will swing through North Carolina and Michigan before returning to the site of his near assassination in Pennsylvania. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka.
All right, Matt, thank you. Private sector hiring increased more than expected last month, a sign that the labor market is still pretty strong. Around 143,000 jobs added in September, according to ADP, up from 103,000 in August. The Fed is watching jobs growth very closely right now to make sure there's not too big of a slowdown. The jobs report coming out on Friday will give us a better idea of where things stand. And it has been nearly a year since Jupiter Medical Center in Florida started using a new tool to detect breast cancer. The procedure is known as contrast enhanced mammography, or CEM. The National News Desk's Stephanie Valderrama has more.
Mammogram exams are the best detection tool to find breast cancer, and doctors at Jupiter Medical Center are using CEM in addition to mammograms. It gives them the ability to catch breast cancer even sooner. So CEM is essentially a dye given to patients through an IV shortly before their scheduled mammograms. It's the same type of dye used in CAT scans. Now, the process is quick, and within 10 minutes, patients can get their results. Here's Dr. Orna Hadar explaining how it's able to detect the breast cancer.
So the way it works and why the dye is sensitive is breast cancer or cancers usually have increased blood flow to them. So there's more blood vessels going to a breast cancer. In addition to that, the actual vessels that go to the blood to the breast cancer are abnormal vessels. They're what we call leaky vessels. So not only does the dye go to the breast cancer, the dye actually leaks out through the vessels. So we're able to see breast cancers earlier because they take up the dye.
Dr. Hadar shared the experience of a newly diagnosed breast cancer patient. Now, the high contrast enhancement was able to spot cancer growing in the patient's other breast, so ultimately CEM caught it in both much sooner. She says this gives the patient a better chance to treat and beat the cancer. And it's always important when we talk about breast cancer to remind our viewers the CDC recommends women get breast cancer exams starting at 40. But if you have a family history of breast cancer, or maybe you're at a higher risk, Dr. Hadar recommends that you start getting them as early as 30. But of course, with all recommendations, the best place to start is by speaking with your primary care doctor.
And coming up, how high school students in Ohio are preparing to help with the presidential election as the start of early voting gets underway. We'll be right back. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we begin in Ohio, where people are questioning why a judge let a convicted felon out of prison early.
You have somebody who, assaults a law enforcement officer, steals their car, hits them with the car in the process, and then is involved in extremely high, dangerous pursuit throughout the community. That's not just law enforcement that's in danger, it's the entire community.
That's exactly what Aaron Cox pled guilty to on August 11th, 2020. He was sentenced to 5 to 6 years in prison for the charges he faced, but on June 10th, 2022, Montgomery County Common Pleas Court Judge Richard Skelton granted Cox's motion for judicial release, meaning Cox had only served 2 out of his 5 to 6 year prison sentence. Montgomery County Judges O'Connell and Wiseman filed a complaint against Judge Skelton. That complaint says that Judge Skelton knows Aaron Cox's mother and texted with her about a potential release for over a year.
A weekend to celebrate Samantha Roberts' bachelorette party in Asheville, North Carolina quickly shifted to this.
When we started to see trees falling, us sheltering there with lanterns, we were out of power already at 8:30 in the morning on Friday.
She and her future sister-in-law, Bailey Opdahl, quickly realized they weren't going anywhere for a while. It was Sunday night. Opdahl says when they got a knock on their front door from a couple who offered them a place to stay a little further down the mountain that had a generator. Monday morning, Roberts says the group created their plan to trek down the mountain, following the same trail another bachelorette party who was staying nearby took and made it down safely. Everyone in Roberts' party also made it to the bottom safely and uninjured.
You're going to attend a 2-hour in-person training. You can mark that off your list. That's what you're doing right here, right now.
At Columbus Alternative High School Tuesday, these young students getting hands-on experience learning how to operate voting machines.
There's your 6. There's Miss Glennis over there.
This group, part of a crop of new poll workers set to be on the front lines on Election Day, November 5th.
And it lets our students see just how hard
the work is.
Their job, an important one that won't be easy. For more than a year now, the On Your Side investigators are looking into threats against election workers nationwide and here at home.
Coming up tonight, Jews around the world are celebrating their new year. What you need to know about this high holy day after the break. Happy New Year to Jews around the world. The holiday Rosh Hashanah begins at sundown and rings in year 5,785 on the Jewish calendar. Literally translated into English, the holiday means head of the year. Tonight also begins the high holiday season for Jews that will last for the next 3 weeks. Jewish holidays begin at night because they follow a lunar-based calendar. Also beginning in just about a half hour from now, voting opening for Fat Bear Week, and we're giving you a live look over Brooks Fall in the Katmai National Park in Alaska. Every year, Explore.org partners with the staff of the national park to celebrate the wild brown bears who need to eat and drink as much as they can to store enough of that fat to survive months of hibernation throughout the winter. The contest, which is in its 10th year, celebrates the resiliency of the 2,200 brown bears that live in the preserve of the Alaska Peninsula. And fans can go on the website at explore.org and vote for their favorites to advance through the bracket. The final Fat Four will be revealed next Monday, and the final vote takes place next Tuesday night for this year's Fat Bear champion. Happy bear watching to you, and that does it for this edition of the National News Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.